What is going on, my friends? Welcome in to a Tuesday edition of NBA Live here at FTNDaily.com. My name is Zach Graham, a.k.a. Kawaisenberg DFS, joined by my good buddy, some might call him the Philly fanatic, an excellent professional golfer. It's Alex Blickle. Alex, how you doing, bud?
Doing very well, though I'd be doing a lot better if it weren't for Doc Rivers and the fact that he is unfortunately a part of my life.
Yeah, man. So obviously we have a fairly sizable Philly contingent in our FTN NBA Discord channel here. You obviously being a part of it, multiple subs, and that wasn't a super fun game, I think, for all of you guys to watch. So I can kind of, as people file in here, obviously only 2 games on tonight's slate. We're into the game 2s here in the conference semifinals. As we let people filter in, I just kind of wanted to give you the floor. 30 seconds, 90 seconds, however long you want, Alex. Actually, I guess I'll cut you off at probably 5 minutes because I know you could go longer than that, but talk to me about what you saw yesterday. I guess even before we tipped off in that series, right? Like, I think you kind of were really frustrated when you saw DeAndre starting.
Yeah, I mean, it made zero sense. Like, I think that I don't need to spend a whole lot of time talking about why it doesn't make sense to play DeAndre Jordan, because the only person in the world who knows that, or who doesn't know that he shouldn't be playing, is Doc Rivers himself. And I say Doc, but I've off stage like committed to just calling him Glenn Rivers now. There's a big faction of the Philadelphia fan base that said, you know what, he's lost that title. He's just Glenn now. So I'm gonna try to stick to that. But yeah, so I think the very clear approach was going to be use Paul Reed and then just go small in those other minutes, particularly when Bam isn't on the floor. And one of the difficulties certainly is that Paul Reed is going to have trouble staying out of foul trouble when Bam is on the floor, because Bam is so physical. And Paul Reed is going to give that physicality back to him, but Bam knows how to control it a lot better than Paul Reed does. Which then gets to another complaint about our good friend Glenn Rivers, because you had the entire second half of the season to be playing Paul Reed important minutes so that he could learn and be fully prepared. Like, I saw somebody make the point, if you want to know why Miami's young role players are playing so much more composed in the playoffs, it's because they've been given the opportunity to grow and improve during the regular season that Paul Reed wasn't given. And now you're asking Paul Reed to play really important minutes against one of the better centers in the league, and you're going to question why he makes some mistakes. Like, it's crazy to me. And Paul Reed played awesome, I might add. Like, I thought he was fantastic outside of the fouls. The only thing he didn't do well was the availability aspect of it by being able to stay on the floor. But there was no need to continue to put DeAndre Jordan back in. And even if you give him, like, okay, he wanted a veteran presence out on the floor, sure, there was no reason to continue to go back to him. Like, it was very obvious right away that DeAndre Jordan had no business being on the floor. And just to put some data to this, like, I know you were encouraged by Paul Millsap or wanted to see more Paul Millsap. Mm-hmm. Millsap kind of struggled in his minutes. They had a 127 defensive rating in the 6 minutes he was on the floor. Small, they were actually quite good. In Paul Reed's minutes, they were +4 and just a 100 defensive rating. And then you get DeAndre Jordan, 88 offensive rating, 159 defensive rating. Why is he on the court? I just don't get it. And now we're committed to starting him next game. Like, I called it sabotage on Twitter, and I don't know what else to call it, because it's like at this point, I feel like this is just Glenn's ego not willing to admit that he gave away the first game with this major blunder of using DeAndre Jordan and continuing to use him throughout the game. And now he's just not going to admit to that and do the right thing for the second game. So it's just incredibly frustrating as a Sixers fan.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, I'm not in the camp of being a fan of teams that make the playoffs anymore, unfortunately. But yeah, I guess I never experienced anything but Greg Popovich decisions, which aren't always perfect, but compared to Glenn, I guess I'll join you guys in just calling him Glenn here. Yeah, that was certainly frustrating to watch, see him come back out in the second half and then get run over Millsap. Like, from a basketball perspective, I'm with you that it needs to be Niang, Tobias, Tybal as like those small ball type of fives. Like, they're kind of all interchangeable there at the 4 and the 5 when they're out there on the floor together. But to not even go back to bring DeAndre back in the third after Reed picked up his fourth, like, I don't know, man. There was a lot of eye rolls from me last night, both on the stream after lock and after Eddie and I stepped away. It is a drought, technically, Shazam. He says Spurs missed the playoffs for a year or two, and after 2 decades straight, and you act like it's a drought. Hey, it's a playoff losing streak. You missed 2 years in a row. Brenton's asking here before we'll go ahead and get into the games here in a second, but Brenton's not on stream. I'll go ahead and ask your opinion on this as well. He's asking a 3v3 here. Jalen Brown, Grayson Allen, and Robert Williams. So you got a little stack of the first game there in that trio, or Tatum, Brook Lopez, and Jonathan Kuminga. For me, it's very much the first one.
Yeah, not even close.
And we'll get into all of those players, obviously. A little over 50 minutes here until this slate locks. First game up, Milwaukee and Boston. We do have the starting lineups, but I won't bury the lead here. If you have not seen the news over the last hour or however long ago it was, 90 minutes, Marcus Smart, who came into the day listed questionable, is out with what I believe is a quad contusion, which is interesting considering he came back and played full minutes in that last game. So obviously that soreness really ramped up on his off day, and he's going to take a seat tonight. Derrick White will be inserted into the starting lineup in place of the Defensive Player of the Year. So he will start alongside Tatum, Brown, Horford, and the Time Lord Robert Williams. Other side of this game, the Bucks going with the same 5: Drew Holiday, Wes Matthews, Bobby Portis, Giannis, and Brook Lopez. Coming into this one, Celtics favored once again, 5-point favorites here at home, down to 4 on my refresh just 5 seconds ago. So 215.5 implied total in this one. That's 12 points below the implied total of game 2, Warriors in Memphis, where the Dubs are favored by 2 on the road, looking to take a 2-0 lead and really would be a commanding lead of that Western Conference semifinal series. But we'll stick here with the Celtics and the Bucks. And I guess let's start with the Celtics because obviously with Smart out, Derrick White, the new hotness, 3-8 on DK getting the start. I think he's a windmill slam. Like I would not shy away from him at, I don't think, any ownership on this 2-game slate. Maybe if it gets up to like 80, then we're talking like, okay, I'll go 50% and I'll go overweight on like Peyton Pritchard or somebody like that. Yeah. But going to be a lot of ownership down there in the value range for this team. But let's start up top. Jason Tatum, Jalen Brown, a little bit underwhelming there in game 1, 9-8 for Tatum on DraftKings, sub 8K, 7.7K for Jalen Brown on DK, and he's guard forward eligible. When you're looking at these 2 guys up top, do you think that they're going to catch a ton of ownership, or I guess a lot of increased ownership from what we projected earlier in the day because of the value that's opened up?
Yeah, I think because of the value, we'll see people either say, okay, the Marcus Smart usage isn't there, so both Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown are better plays, or they'll say, okay, I have this extra value. Now I can get all the way up to Giannis. And so I think what we'll see is a real concentration of ownership between those 3. And then I don't think we'll see as much Drew as we should. Like Eddie pointed out last slate, Drew has been under-owned every single slate so far this postseason. Finally delivered with the ceiling performance last game. I think this is now a much better matchup for him without Marcus Smart on the floor. You know, he has a very clear size advantage now on whoever's guarding him, which is something that typically he has really taken advantage of historically. He just really knows how to use his bigger body and get into the lane and use that to finish well. So I really like Drew here. I maybe like him even more than Giannis. And I definitely like him more than the Boston studs, just because I think like one of the themes that we've seen throughout this postseason is when a major contributor goes down, it doesn't mean that there's this automatic boost to everybody else, because the defenses suddenly have an easier time keying in on those guys. And so I'm definitely hesitant to go to Tatum and Brown, not because I don't think they do have a slightly improved outlook now, just that I don't think that slight improvement is worth the big ownership boost that I think we'll see from them. So I'd rather pivot. I think Ja Morant is once again my favorite spend up option. I could not believe when I saw he was only 22% on the last slate. And honestly, he might be even lower than that this slate with everyone going to these to the 3 studs in this game. So Morant is definitely my favorite pay up, which obviously means I'm going to have a tougher time getting to some of these other guys. And then one discussion that I know we'll get into is what to do with Steph and Clay and Jordan Poole, because I think there's a really interesting dynamic going on there with basically Golden State taking a page out of the Minnesota playbook and just trying to attack Ja Morant every possession. And so there are definitely some things that we can take from that. But obviously, like it's all connected. And so I don't think I'm going to get to those 2 for Boston just because I have guys I like more.
Okay. That makes sense to me. And that's kind of the theme of these 2 game slates, right? You were talking about Drew and how under-owned he was on that first slate, Sunday afternoon, I guess it was. He was like 17% or something like that in the DK main GPP.
Yeah, and in single entries, he was in single digits. Okay, in the $200,
we see a similar number on him tonight. I think maybe maybe low to mid 20s, but to your point, I think it's still too low on Drew. And I know we're bouncing between teams here, but the point has to be made. And I think you and I are kind of in lockstep there on Drew. Like even before Smart was out, I thought he was an extremely strong play on the slate, especially in tournaments. And we saw it last game, right? Like we talked about, and I know you were in the Discord when Eddie and I were on stream on Sunday, or I guess David, Eddie, and I, and we were talking about how the majority of this Bucks offense is just going through Giannis and Drew. Like that Middleton usage really, like the majority of it slides to those 2 other studs, and then the other guys kind of pick up the pieces. So you saw like Drew had 50 and a quarter DK points. And I didn't think he didn't shoot it that well. Like 8 of 20. I'm looking more at the 20 number, right? Like you don't see Drew Holiday put up 20 plus shot attempts all that often. So I'm with you there. I guess if you had to, would you spend up on Tatum, or do you think you would take the discount to Jalen so you could use some of those funds to maybe get up to a Ja Morant?
Yeah, I would be more likely to use Jalen Brown. I think this is the instance for Tatum where we see there's another guy out, so it just becomes easier for Milwaukee to key on him. They obviously did a really good job in game 1, and I was discouraged by the somewhat lack of the peripherals for Tatum. Like he didn't get quite as many peripherals as he was getting in that Brooklyn series. Now it's just one game, that could obviously change, but it also could be just about like how they're defending, what their rotations are looking like, and maybe he's just being put in position for fewer of those peripherals. And I think part of it too is like, whereas Brooklyn was really struggling to play through their stars, and it was going to the secondary guys. Milwaukee was able to do what they wanted to do offensively. They were able to play through Drew and Giannis. I think Giannis had a 37% usage rate, and Drew was at like 28%. So they were able to do what they wanted to do, and that's, I think, just another reason why maybe we're not going to see the peripherals for Tatum pop quite like they did last series, in which case, a $2,100 difference between Tatum and Brown? Like that's a little bit too much for me.
So let's talk a little bit about the front court here before we really dissect the guard value. Al Horford obviously got the time in game 1, a little over 36 minutes. And this team lost, let me double check, but I think it was like almost 2 minutes. Yeah, minute 58 that these starters lost to garbage time. So you were looking at 38 minutes of Horford. Those guys we just talked about, you were looking at 40 minutes of Jalen, 42 of Tatum, things like that. So if you're going to get high 30s in minutes from Al Horford in this series, power forward eligible on DraftKings, he's not exactly cheap, but 5'8" is certainly not too expensive, I think, for Al Horford in 36 or 38 minutes. Then the Time Lord, I think he was 4-6, or no, he was 5K flat last game. That's right. But only got 22 minutes. I think he gets more in like the 25-26 range. Would not be surprised to see 28 in this game from the Time Lord. And I absolutely love getting him into lineups tonight at 4-9. We saw him get like 6 and 8 with like 4 stocks. Yeah, in that game one. I just think there's upside here for more. He projects really well for me at 4-9 center only. So I think I would prefer to drop down to the Time Lord here tonight. How are you looking at those two guys? And I guess we could throw 4K Grant Williams in there as well, because he picked up a lot of extra time, almost 29 minutes in game.
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement on Robert Williams. I will say I'm a little bit hesitant to just go right to the net ratings after one game. But I do think it's worth noting.
Sure.
Marcus Smart had the best net rating for Boston. Then it was Robert Williams, then Al Horford. So I think that they have every reason to keep Robert Williams on the floor as much as they feel comfortable doing so. I don't think that they gain anything taking him off the floor, putting someone like Grant Williams on the floor. The lack of Marcus Smart is going to make it so that they have all the more reason to leave Williams on the floor and go with a bigger lineup and try to attack Milwaukee that way. So I'm totally with you. Like, Robert Williams is a fantasy point per minute monster. If we think that all of a sudden his minutes outlook is even 3 to 4 minutes better, let alone the possibility of like 6 to 8 minutes better, it's just such a good spot for him. And his price also went down. Like, he was, I felt like he was under owned at about 45% in single entries at 5,000. Now he's 4,900. I don't think he's going to get anywhere close to the point where I would want to fade him.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy that if we didn't have this guard value for the Celtics, would have been a 10 in the rankings for me today.
Yeah.
That being Time Lord. I do want to note to all the subs here, I know we hadn't had a projection update for a couple hours. One just came in about 90 seconds ago. So anybody who was looking for that, go ahead and refresh. And let's talk about these guards, right? Derrick White getting the start. You're going to see more Peyton Pritchard off the bench. He only got 11 minutes in game one, but put up 8 shots, all of them from 3. And that's something that we really harped on going into game one, is how many threes the Bucks are going to allow the Celtics to take here. Turned out to be 50 as a team, 50 attempts from beyond the arc, and Pritchard took 8 of them. So maybe he's not firing them up at quite that high of a clip, but 3-1 on Peyton Pritchard, 3-8 on the starting Derrick White. I think both of those guys extremely strong values. Obviously Derrick White, but I think you can pair the two. And I guess as a whole from the Celtics, I was tinkering with some placeholder lineups earlier. I think you can get away with playing 5 Celtics in a lineup tonight. Like, there are lineups I made that I did not hate. I think 4 is probably kind of my magic number where I would land in most of my lineups if I was running a 20 max tonight. But just to get that out there for anybody in the chat who was wondering what my limits would be, it's the full 5 Celtics tonight. I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I think I'd be okay with that too. And then I'd also just say, if you're doing that kind of thing, then you want to make sure that you also have some of the Milwaukee studs. Like, if you're going to use 5 Celtics, I'd say you absolutely have to have at least one of Giannis and Drew.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'd go so far as to say you either want Giannis or you want both of Drew and Bobby Portis.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm with you there. The only thing I'd say is we might be underestimating the importance of Marcus Smart, in the sense that they might have some trouble staying competitive with him out. Now, it's entirely possible they go on and win this game. Like, we certainly don't know, but I wouldn't rule out the possibility that Milwaukee just kind of rolls here. And I don't think it would be because they steamroll them offensively. I think it would be because they just lock all windows and doors defensively, like they were able to do against the Bulls a few times, in which case a lot of these Boston guys, particularly the expensive ones, could end up being the type of landmine that we really want to avoid in our lineups. So there could be an edge to saying, what, there's all this value here, and these guys certainly are good plays, but the game environment of Golden State Memphis is fantastic. Let's just stack that, hope this first game kind of busts all around, and just put ourselves in a really good position that way.
Yeah, I think it was Ezekiel in the chat who was saying that earlier, that the way he wanted to get different tonight was stacking that second game and just kind of picking and choosing one or two players from this first game. So that certainly will be a different build tonight. Couple questions here from the chat regarding this game and the Celtics specifically. Now, Ricky was asking, Smart being out should be a significant boost to Brown and or Tatum, no? And just on the season, games that Marcus Smart missed, it was a bigger increase usage-wise for Jalen Brown. But like I said a few hours ago when that news came out, it certainly doesn't hurt either of those guys from a usage standpoint. I get to your point, I think, Alex, that it may hurt the team overall just because they may have more trouble keeping this competitive.
Yeah. And then I think it's worth talking a lot about Derrick White and Peyton Pritchard, because I do feel like there's real merit to fading White for Pritchard, but it's also certainly true that you can get away with playing both of them. And so I'm actually curious about your opinion on this, because Derrick White was about a negative 24 net rating in his 17 minutes last game. And he actually shot it fairly well, 64.4% true shooting percentage. So I guess I'm sort of thinking, what if Derrick White doesn't play 30 minutes? What if he doesn't just step into the Marcus Smart role? And what if he only plays 24 minutes? A lot of those with the starters where we should expect his usage to be pretty low. Like if this is a fairly even split between Derrick White and Peyton Pritchard, I would definitely prefer to have Pritchard. So it's just a matter of like how fragile are White's minutes here? Or do we feel like he's just locked in the 30 plus no matter what?
So I initially, when I redid the minutes, I only had White at 30. I ended up bumping him up to 32. And I think that the minutes are fairly safe because of the defensive side of it, right? Like the defense of Derrick White in this scenario, right? I mean, really guarding anybody on that Milwaukee side that's going to be in the rotation, those top 8. Like, I guess you can get away with some Peyton Pritchard on Javon, right? And Javon Carter. Yep. But I still want, like, I just think you have to not minimize Peyton Pritchard's minutes, but you really have to prioritize having Derrick White out there as much as you can, just for, like, this is exactly why they traded for Derrick White.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's this exact scenario where it's not Peyton Pritchard. It's not Dennis Schroeder in place of an injured Marcus Smart. It's Derrick White and his, I won't say stifling defense, but a guy who has been the runner-up, I think, maybe twice, but at least once, to second-team all-defense. And so I just think that part of his game is the most valuable thing that he's bringing to the floor tonight. And if Derrick White can add 2 threes, 3 threes like he did last game, because the shot attempts are going to be there. It's just, Derrick White, a very streaky offensive player. From a fantasy perspective, we're going to need him to knock down some shots tonight. Going back to the chat here, the thoughts on Peyton Pritchard. I don't think he's super risky because of the 3-1 tag. I guess potentially if he saw a minutes haircut because Derrick White if Derrick White gets 36 minutes, right? He gets that Marcus Smart role completely. Peyton Pritchard's still going to have more minutes than he did in game 1, but we'll get into guys like DeAnthony Melton, Gary Payton, who should get the start again for the Warriors. Peyton Pritchard, I think I would still have him behind Gary Payton. I think it's closer for me between Peyton Pritchard and DeAnthony Melton, but we'll get into those two guys. Do you have any other thoughts on Peyton Pritchard?
No, I think the only thought to add is like sort of what you just alluded to, that decision is going to be a lot about how you feel about some of these other values from the other game, like Otto Porter and Gary Payton specifically, but then also DeAnthony Melton. I think the only other thing I'd say is if you do want to fade Derrick White, I don't like doing a 1v1 switch to DeAnthony Melton. I would much prefer to go to Peyton Pritchard, just because then you get the inverse correlation between the two, because you're hoping you're hoping that Derrick White doesn't play 32 to 36 minutes. You're hoping he plays 24 minutes. And if he does, there's a good chance Peyton Pritchard's also playing 24 minutes. Like you said, he jacked up 8 threes in 11 minutes. So the chance that he could do something pretty good fantasy point per minute wise is also pretty high.
Doomy was asking if we like Grant Williams more than Derrick White. Not even close for me. And then Kruger's was asking, since I have them ranked all as 9s, and this could spark a discussion between us because of who I have last in this. Oh, he added 2 more, so my apologies. Krugers, he asked, how would I prioritize these studs? Giannis, Drew, John, Steph, Tatum, and Jalen. I missed the Tatum and Jalen part of that. So out of those first 4, I had Drew, Giannis, Steph, and Ja. And we can have a Ja discussion for sure right now if you want to. But how would you prioritize those guys? Is Ja number 1 or Drew?
Ja is number 1. Drew is number 2. And then I'd probably also be higher on Steph than Giannis. So I'd go Steph 3rd, Giannis 4th. But then I'd add in the caveat that if you don't have Drew, then I would put Giannis up above Steph. But the one unchanged thing for me is that Ja is number 1, and then the 2 Celtics are 5th and 6th.
Let's see. Hugo was asking, referring to the usage bump to Brown with Smart out, do we know how much of that was before White was acquired? A good bit of it, actually. I believe there was only 2 games that Marcus Smart sat out after the trade deadline. You still see it is a smaller usage bump to Jalen Brown. But unsurprisingly, Derrick White is the guy that really pops with Smart off the court for full games with no Marcus Smart. Steelers fan, JJJ, Clark, or Portis. Clark is 3rd for me there for sure. I think I would lean Triple J, but Portis also a very solid value. How do you feel about those 3?
I would say it largely depends on which of the 2 Milwaukee studs you're playing, if any. Like if you don't have Giannis or Drew, Portis has to be the one out of those 3. I think if you have Giannis, then you don't want Portis, and if you have Drew, then it's kind of just pick your poison. As far as the Memphis guys go, I actually feel like I might rather have Clark than JJJ, just because it feels a little bit like going to Jackson would be chasing here, and I do think Jackson really, really benefited from no Draymond in the second half. Like I don't see him getting the wide open look after wide open look that he had last game without any real reaction to it. Now, I do think part of that was he just came down the floor and chucked a few times in a way that you wouldn't expect anybody to guard him. But at the same, that's who Jaren Jackson is. He's going to get really streaky, and he's going to have those games where his confidence is through the roof. And then he's also going to have the games where he's fouling and he misses a few shots early and the confidence isn't there and he just kind of disappears. And so I think because there's a good chance that we see some chasing with the ownership, I'd rather go to the other side of it this time.
That makes sense to me. I think why I would stay on Triple J is, number 1, I think he's at, I won't say much less, he has that less of a risk of fouling out against this Warriors team because he gets to guard Draymond and sag off 2 feet when Draymond's at the top of the key. And we've seen this type of ceiling, not just the 52 last game, but the 45.5 closing out Minnesota in game 6 of that first round series. We know that Triple J has the upside to just blow this 6-1 price tag out of the water. And I think Brandon Clark's maybe not priced for his ceiling, but he's priced more appropriately for the upside that you can get out of him from a fantasy perspective. And I'm going to be really interested to see what happens. Hopefully he gets healthy soon. But when Steven Adams is available for this team, if he gets back into really any sort of role for the Grizzlies here. Let's finish up with Milwaukee here. We talked at length about Drew, both of us big fans of him tonight. I guess let's just touch on Giannis real quick. 11-4, no issue finding the salary to get up to him tonight. I do think that you can build some very strong lineups without Giannis because of the middling prices on Jalen Brown and Drew Holiday and even Steph Curry, right? This is a cheaper price on Steph Curry in the playoffs than we've seen in the past. So how do you feel about Giannis? He didn't shoot that well. I'll say that. 13 rebounds, 12 assists, 2 blocks. It's hard to say he didn't play that well. Good defensive performance from him. How do you feel about Giannis? If you have one lineup, are you trying to get him in there?
I wouldn't be forcing it. I would be building sort of from the Memphis game out, where I'm starting with John Morant and Draymond Green, and then just kind of going from there. And I think like the big question for me is going to be, do I want Giannis or do I want the combination of Drew Holiday and Bobby Portis? Given what I'm seeing from ownership right now, I think I want that combination of Drew and Portis instead. But if my build takes me to Giannis instead, like I'm going to be completely okay with that.
Herm made a point in chat here that I wanted to bring up because I think he's right on here, saying that I don't think people have the Giannis set up in proper perspective. He was talking about earlier that Giannis is still playing without Middleton, and I don't know if everybody is, or he didn't know if everybody was really factoring that in. He says, what evidence has he shown that anything will prevent him from breaking 60 outside of a blowout? And this goes back to last season's playoffs. He's essentially immune to down games in these spots since he's made the leap. And I guess that would maybe be the argument against it, is a potential blowout. I'm not putting in the call for that. But to that end, we saw 47 and 40 DK against Chicago, but Boston certainly isn't Chicago. So how do you react to that? Like, I don't think either of us are saying that he's not probably the safest play on the slate. But from my perspective, I think you can build lineups without him that have maybe more upside than a lineup with Giannis, certainly on par.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the way DraftKings prices everybody in the playoffs, I think balanced builds do have an inherent advantage. It takes like a ceiling game from Giannis or Jokic that we saw in the last series to kind of break that mold. But of course, you have to hit on all the ceilings, right? So if you hit on Giannis because he's so expensive, you can survive a down game from like a value play. Whereas if you're going with two mid-tier guys that have upside and you get the big bust from one of them, that has a much greater chance of sinking your lineup, even if the other one hits. So that's sort of the argument against the balanced build. But I feel like there's just a bigger combination of too cheap and too low owned with the Drew and Portis combination. Like I feel really strongly that both of those guys are going to hit as well. So I don't really feel the need to chase Giannis' ceiling when, if he does have the ceiling game, half the field is going to have that ceiling game. So you're not really going to separate in that way. So I think the more we talk about it, the more I'm leaning towards the Drew Portis combination.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. Congrats to Tyler Hero. Maybe the most runaway of all the awards, and for good reason. 6th man of the year. If Klay Thompson's healthy, and I'll look forward. I don't know if there's any lines out on this yet. I'm sure there's not, but Jordan Poole going to be a pretty good bet for 6th man of the year next year. Brook Lopez, 4.8, right? So a price pivot from the Time Lord. Got 28 minutes there in game 1. Brook Lopez, not quite the fantasy asset that he used to be, certainly going back to his days in Brooklyn, but can still put up a nice game, especially at this price if he's getting close to 30 minutes. How do you feel about him as a pivot off maybe both Time Lord and Bobby Portis? Like maybe do you pair Brolo and Giannis or something like that? How do you feel about Brook?
So I can't remember if it was you or Eddie on the last stream who basically said like Brook Lopez is at risk of playing a lot less in this series.
I think it was Eddie.
It was, yeah. And I was very much in agreement with that thought. Now, he did play 28 minutes, but it's worth noting, like Bobby Portis' net rating was plus 12.7, Connaughton 24.4, Giannis 25.8, Grayson Allen was plus 5.1, and then there's Brook Lopez at negative 16. So I do think like what Eddie was talking about is exactly what played out for Milwaukee, which is this is just a series that it's going to be much more difficult for him to both stay on the floor and to be really effective when he's on the floor, because everyone else on the floor is just significantly more mobile than he is in this series. And it just gives Boston sort of an inherent advantage. And weirdly, like, the advantage was on both sides of the floor. So Brook Lopez, when he was on the floor, the team had an offensive rating of just 84, defensive rating of 100. Both of those were the worst on the team. So like it's pretty clear. Yes, it's only one game, but he did play 28 minutes, so the sample was pretty good. And that's a pretty extreme thing to have the team's worst offensive rating and the team's worst defensive rating come from one guy. Particularly when somebody as smart as Eddie sort of like called exactly that coming into the series. So I would be very concerned about Brook Lopez. And I think that's another reason to be high on Bobby Portis, because if Brook Lopez goes from 28 to 20 minutes, that's going to be more center minutes for Bobby Portis, which means the rebounding equity goes up. And I'd also say like that might hurt Giannis, because in the first game, like Bobby Portis had a 29.7 defensive rebound rate, Giannis 22.7. And Brook Lopez, obviously, like, he doesn't rebound the ball very often. So just 16.7 for him. So more Bobby Portis center minutes could cut into the Giannis rebound equity. It goes way up for Portis. So sort of like everything's sort of telling me the same story, which is load up on Portis, load up on Drew, and fade Giannis.
Some of these value guys, Grayson Allen, Pat Connaughton, Javon Carter. I guess we'll throw Wesley Matthews in there since he's getting the start. I don't think you would catch me playing Wes Matthews today. Maybe I would have one or two in 150 just in case. But Javon Carter, a game high plus 25 in his time last game. Patsy 3-8 on DraftKings. Grayson Allen up at 4-7, and his hot shooting continued last game. 3 of 6 from 3, 4 of 8 from the field in his 29 minutes. Out of these four guys that are sub 4-8 for the Bucks, and coming off the bench, I guess with the exception of Wes, Pat C is my favorite there. Wouldn't hate if somebody got to Grayson Allen and just keep riding that hot hand. How do you feel about those four guys before we move to the second game?
I would agree on how you have them rated, but I would say I don't think any are necessary, because now we have the Boston value with White and Pritchard, and I think the Golden State value of Gary Payton and Otto Porter. I prefer both of those guys. And I might even prefer DeAnthony Melton, just because it seems like he's going to play a role in this series. It makes sense given the fact that Golden State has 3 like stud guards and Gary Payton now playing. And then Melton is such a good fantasy point per minute guy that it just makes sense for him to have a role in this series, and that makes him viable right away.
Well, let's flip, as we're 20 minutes out from lock here. Let's flip to the nightcap, the late night hammer. I don't even know if you can call it that on a 2-game slate, but Warriors still there in the grindhouse in Memphis. 2-point road favorites tonight are the Warriors. The Grizzlies, I guess really both teams, although I think Klay Thompson a little bit more clarity. Coach Kerr said he's fine. He went through shoot around. He was on the injury report with some knee soreness. But on the other side, Desmond Bane and Shazam asking us a few minutes ago about Desmond Bane. Listed questionable, sore back. I don't think, at least I haven't seen any updates on his status for tonight. Do you think there's any chance that he misses this one?
I don't think so, but maybe that's an incorrect assumption on my part. I don't really know. I didn't get the sense that he was actually a question mark.
Yeah, I'm not going to call this like a Miami questionable, because I don't think we have enough certainly historical data on Memphis listing guys questionable. I don't think it's as sure a probable as some of those guys seem to be on a day-to-day basis, but I think I'm with you, man. Like I have a hard time seeing him sitting this one out. And it wasn't a good performance from him. A lot of that guard production from a fantasy standpoint came from your guy, John Morant. 68 and a quarter DK points, 1 rebound shy of the triple-double, which would have put him, I don't know, he was very close to like a 75 DK point night, 31 shot attempts in his 38-plus minutes. You said he's one of your favorite plays on the slate tonight. Talk to me about Ja.
It's It's the pace of the game, I think, first and foremost. Like he's obviously one of the guys in the league who benefits from a really up-tempo environment. We saw it with Minnesota to some degree, but they have Pat Beverly. Golden State doesn't have anybody like that, and Ja was just able to get to the rim whenever he wanted. They were daring him to shoot the three, which might be smart for them, but it's great for Morant's outlook because he is going to take them and he will knock a fair amount of them down. Like I think the reason why they're giving him the open three is because they know they cannot keep him in front of them, and they don't have the type of rim protection to keep him from scoring inside. Like as great a defender as Draymond Green is, Morant just elevates and he can do whatever he wants without a Karl Anthony Towns type back there. So this is just a fantastic matchup for him. And I think like Golden State's really strong team defense means that Memphis's best offense is just going to be let Morant be the highlight reel and superstar that he is. And I just think he's going to keep doing that all series long.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only place that I would break from that prediction or forecast is 4 threes. Like, I don't think we're going to see a lot of games where even shoots 11. Mm-hmm. He was feeling it last game. Like 4 of 11 is not an elite 3-point performance from any player in the NBA, but for Ja, it's pretty damn good. Outside of that, man, I'm with you. I think on the other side of this game, we can kind of bounce between both teams here, saving 1,000 to get to Steph Curry at what I think is going to be lower ownership. I've seen some discrepancies around the industry, at least before we got started here. Only 8 of 20, put up that same Drew Holiday 8 of 20 performance, 5 of 12 from 3 for Steph in that last one. I certainly don't think, and again, the entire backcourt for the Warriors, with the exception of Jordan Poole, who had a fantastic game, was in foul trouble at one time or another throughout that first half and some in the third quarter there. So we still saw Steph get mostly full minutes there, right around 37. I think I slightly prefer him in tournaments to Ja Morant, because I do think a lot of people are going to see, I mean, first of all, Ja Morant is kind of the new hotness this season, not just from a fantasy standpoint, but around the league. 260 plus point DK performances in his last 3 games. I just think I would lean towards Steph in tournaments, but I'm by no means saying that Ja is a bad play. How do you feel about Steph? And I guess let's jump into the 7K Clay 6'9", which is a very nice price on Jordan Poole. Jordan Poole, I mean, he put up kind of a Ja Morant-esque game, 31, 8, and 9 with 2 blocks in his 38 minutes. How do you feel about the spend-ups here in the Warriors backcourt? Because I think I would be running far away from Jordan Poole today if I was playing.
Yeah, I don't think we can talk about one of these 3 Warriors without talking about all of them together, because they play such like a – I guess they play the matchups between the 3 a lot of the time, and because Steph is the best, like he typically has the best matchup, but they hunted Ja Morant relentlessly, which is exactly what Minnesota did. They had success with it, and that's why Jordan Poole was so explosive in that game, because he had the most of the Ja Morant matchup. It wouldn't surprise me at all to see the biggest adjustment from Taylor Jenkins this game is to say, okay, Ja does not go onto Jordan Poole. Instead, he goes to Clay. And I think the reason why that would make a lot of sense is Clay is the least likely to beat Ja off the bounce. And so Ja just has to keep him from getting the wide open threes. That does, though, I think, make me like Klay Thompson quite a bit. And then the other advantage to Klay is he has some small forward eligibility, and guard is actually pretty loaded on this slate. Mm-hmm. But if I was just answering this in a vacuum, which player do I like the most given his price and ownership? The answer is Steph. And I think like my strongest feeling in this game and on the slate and for the entire second round of the playoffs is I think Draymond Green is going to absolutely dominate from a fantasy point per minute perspective, and also just with his play throughout this entire series. And Draymond correlates really, really well with Steph historically, so that would be another reason to go to Steph. But I mean, he correlates well with everybody. So I feel a lot stronger about Draymond Green than I do picking correctly out of Poole, Thompson, Steph. But yeah, I don't. I think the question we have to answer to get Steph, Poole, and Clay correct is, where is Ja going to spend most of the defensive minutes?
Yeah. I mean, Draymond was just on his way to a massive fantasy game, at least for the price, right? He was, I think, 6'4" last game. 6'6". He actually came down $100 after the ejection. And the 5 turnovers, like, I mean, I don't know, man. I'm right there with you on Draymond. Like, he's a 10 for me today.
The thing about those turnovers were a couple of them, like, they were good passes, and the cutter just didn't make the catch, and the ball went out of bounds. Like, 2 of those turnovers should have been assists, and he would have been on pace for a triple-double with 4 stocks in the first half. It's like, oh, my God, he's going for 55 or 60 draft.
Yep. Vintage Draymond fantasy performance there.
It would not surprise me at all to see 50-plus Draftkings points for him. And I said before last game, like, I was predicting an average of 40-plus Draftkings points throughout the series. Obviously, that got a little bit tougher, but if we adjust that and account for the fact that one of those halves he was ejected for, like, he's on pace for it. He was at, I think, like 21.5 in the first half, maybe even more. So that's where I'm seeing him, and he's the first guy in my lineup. And if I was playing 150 lineups, I'd be using him in 150 of them.
Let's talk about some of these other guys from this game, maybe secondary type of names here, if I can say that about some of these players. Memphis side here, right? Dillon Brooks was in some foul trouble last game. I think some of his foul issues maybe overshadowed by having Triple J on his team, but still got to 30 minutes. I think this is a guy that Jenkins really wants and needs to run out there for 36-ish minutes if he can keep his hands to himself well enough. So at 5'5", I mean, this is a guy who, if he does get full minutes, is probably going to put up 18, maybe get to 20 shot attempts. In my opinion, he's too cheap, and I would have some I won't say big time interest in Dillon Brooks, but I don't think you have to play a ton to get over the field on him tonight. And in MME builds, he's somebody that I would have interest in doing so. I would play him over Brandon Clark tonight in tournaments. I think you could make the argument to play him over Triple J, but I think Triple J certainly has a higher upside, and they have similar foul concerns. How do you feel about Dillon Brooks? And I guess then get into DeAnthony Melton, who did benefit from the Dillon Brooks foul trouble a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough to say, number one, with Melton, like, would he still have a path to extra minutes if Brooks isn't in foul trouble? I think the answer is yes, because they could easily play multiple guards at the same time, especially if Golden State goes to that death lineup more often. Or if they use like a version of that death lineup that instead of Wiggins has Gary Payton on the floor. So I do think the path is still there for Melton, and he's so good from a per minute perspective that he's definitely still viable. Where I give Brooks the advantage there is Brooks has small forward eligibility, and again, like there's so much opportunity cost at the guard position tonight, and so it makes it a lot tougher to get to Melton over someone like Brooks. But yeah, I think I would go Clark over Brooks. But it's close. Like and I think the argument for one is the same for the other, that it's just a great game environment. Both of those guys, like almost everyone in this game, benefits from up-tempo environments. So I wouldn't really argue against anybody from this game except Tillman, even if he starts again. I have no interest in Looney. I think some people might look and say, oh, Looney played, 19 minutes last game or whatever, and forget the fact that he played as much as he did just because Draymond wasn't available.
Yep.
But I think the biggest question for me from a rotation standpoint is, what effect did Draymond's absence have on the minutes for Gary Payton in the second half and for Otto Porter Jr.? Because for Payton especially, like, I think he probably played more in the second half than we should expect him to play in a half, but he also played significantly fewer minutes in the first half because of foul trouble than he otherwise would have. So maybe it ended up breaking even.
Yeah, I think I think I'm probably with you on it, just kind of breaking even. I mean, we didn't only see Kevon Looney get the start for Draymond in the second half, but Poole came in there and got the start for the little glove. Yeah, I mean, I guess another thing I wanted to touch on with the guards in this game on the other side is there was some discussion earlier this afternoon on Tyus Jones. And, we're 2 or 3 games removed from seeing Tyus Jones closing games in that series against Minnesota and hitting big shots. And D'Anthony Melton was a DNP-CD, I think the last 2, maybe 3 games of that series. I don't think that we're going to see something different between those two tonight in terms of rotation. I do think Melton's minutes come down a little bit as long as Brooks and the rest of those starters stay out of foul trouble in the backcourt. Melton came in well before, like Tyus Jones didn't appear in that game until the second quarter. I just think this series is more fit for D'Anthony Melton. Not that Tyus Jones is not a fit for this series, but D'Anthony Melton gives them more of that scoring punch that they need to keep up with this Warriors team. How do you feel about Tyus Jones?
Yeah, that's my exact read. Like Tyus Jones, the beauty of Tyus Jones is that he just doesn't make mistakes. He does everything correctly, but you can't just not make mistakes against Golden State because they're too talented for him defensively and offensively. Like you said, you need to pack more of a punch to keep up with them. So it's not that I don't think Tyus can give them valuable minutes. I think he can. I think it's just that Melton offers a dimension that Tyus doesn't have, and it's one that's valuable. And maybe what we see is like Tyus might get favored a little bit if Memphis is leading, but when trailing, I think they have to go to Melton.
How about some of these other values? I mean, we talked about Gary Payton. We touched on Kevon Looney, and I think both of us would avoid him tonight. Maybe a share in 150. Mm-hmm. He's 3-2. He will get a turn in both halves, barring something crazy. Jonathan Kuminga's down there at 3-1. I think he's going to see similar minutes, maybe a few more than Kevon Looney. I don't think he's going to project for enough for me to get any, certainly in 20 lineups. Otto Porter, though, 3-7. Otto Porter, not the worst fantasy producer in the world, got some extended time in the first half of last game. I think some of that guard foul trouble did trickle down a little bit to Otto Porter to start the second quarter, and then he did come in for Draymond for the last 90 seconds or whatever it was after he got tossed. How do you feel about Otto Porter as kind of a lower owned value compared to the Celtics guys, the D'Anthony Meltons? He's 3-7.
Yeah, I liked Otto quite a bit last slate, and I used him, and I was pleased with the output, but it was surprising to me that he only got to 22 or 23 minutes given the Draymond ejection, and so that does have me a little bit hesitant. Like I think Golden State really wants to have Gary Payton on the floor, and I feel like Otto is the one who's going to be hurt from that because I think what they learned last game is they want Jordan Poole on the floor as much as possible because as long as they have multiple guys of Steph, Poole, and Clay, and especially if they have all three, they can match up Hunt and guarantee themselves that they are going to have a major advantage in at least one of those matchups every time down the floor. But then they want Peyton's defense, and of course they want Draymond on the floor. So to me, like the odd man out is Otto Porter. I wouldn't be surprised if we only see 18, 20 minutes from him. In which case, on this slate, like I don't love it because there's so much value elsewhere.
Good question here from our buddy Whammy in the Discord. Says, do you see Gary Payton closing for Wiggins, or were his minutes elevated because Draymond got tossed? I would say the first thing is Gary Payton started last game. I do think he gets the start again here tonight. But they did. I mean, they closed Wiggins, Clay, Steph, Gary Payton, and Jordan Poole last game. Extremely small. And then there was some offense defense there at the end. Obviously, that game came down right to the last possession. Mm-hmm. Do you think they close? I mean, obviously, Draymond is going to be in there as long as he can stay in this game. Do you think Gary Payton is the one that gets the hook down the stretch, or how do you see that playing out?
I feel like Peyton's going to be on the floor because they want him on Ja. I think that they feel better with him on Ja than Wiggins, and certainly they don't want any of Steph, Poole, or Clay on Ja. And so I feel like, unless they go to some sort of zone that they feel comfortable with, that they think they can defend him in that way, I feel like Gary Payton's going to have to be on the floor for them. And especially because like we saw Ja just completely take over down the stretch. He was, I mean, the proportion of Memphis's points that he scored in the fourth quarter was crazy high, right? So I think the number one concern come fourth quarter, come closing time is how do you keep Ja from taking over? And Gary Payton's probably their best option there.
Sure. I think Poole's the one that gets put to the bench there. It's going to be him or Clay. I think Steph, Wiggins, Dre are the three that you can certainly count on, and I'm with you on the logic on Gary Payton. Let's turn to the Discord here. 2 minutes to go until lock. Couple more questions coming in here. Jalen was asking, is he dumb for fading Derrick White? I've seen numbers 70, 80% around the industry in the last 30 minutes.
I don't think it's dumb. I think it's really viable. I think the only mistake you can possibly make is fading him in the wrong way, which would be just like going to D'Anthony Melton instead. Like I think if you're fading him, it has to be for Peyton Pritchard. That's how I'd say it. You can either play Derrick White, or you can play Peyton Pritchard, or you can play both, but you can't play neither of them.
Easy B's asking, Peyton Pritchard or Gary Payton? And my answer is Gary Payton, as long as you have Derrick White in there. If you don't have Derrick White, get you some PP.
Yeah, I would agree.
Any other questions? We are just over a minute from lock.
I'll flip that question for you and say, if you have Peyton Pritchard, Derrick White, or Gary Payton?
I think it's going to depend on how many other Celtics I have, to be honest. Like, if I only have Time Lord, I think I'm just going to eat the white chalk there and try to get different somewhere else, or just like not care, about the ownership in my lineup. Like, Derrick White projects that well tonight.
Yeah, the sort of corollary, if you will, to what you just said, though, is if Boston gets blown out, then Pritchard's going to benefit, and then you wouldn't want more Celtics. So like there is a path to just saying, okay, come off the Boston game. One of the ways that multiple Boston guys fail is if they get blown out because they just can't hang without Marcus Smart, in which case it makes sense to go to Gary Payton. So it's one of those things where I don't really feel like there's a wrong answer. I'm not sure that decision is really going to affect your probability of success a whole lot. Just kind of go with whatever you want.
Sure. That makes sense to me. We are at lock, as Teo says, he's fading all Celtics except for Peyton Pritchard. So good luck, everybody. We are at lock, so still 45-ish people hanging around here at lock. Only 10 likes though. So if you're on your way out, or you're hanging around for a few minutes, hit that like button for us. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, you can do so. Hit the notification bell to know when FTN goes live. I know most days of the week, Alex, we have like a full morning, late morning and afternoon of free streams covering all kinds of sports, daily betting, mean streets, all that good stuff. So yeah, hit that subscribe button. We're trying to get to 5,000. We're at 4.8K here. I want to get to 5 by the end of the NBA Finals. So, and people may be here catching us for free and not signed up at FTN Daily yet. You can do so and use the promo code FTN TV. It gets you 15% off any package. And we did just roll out the platinum package, which I believe is everything at FTN, I think. And then, if it's not this, you can come back, you can put it on me, but I think it's FTN bets, FTN fantasy, and FTN daily, everything for $99 a month. Do you know if I'm correct on that, Alex?
I don't know if you're correct, but I do know that it sounds right. I think
I am pretty positive that that's the case. I'll get my shill in order for tomorrow for that platinum package. But again, you can sign up at FTN Daily. Any package, you get 15% off with that promo code FTN TV. It's all one word. And specifically with the NBA package, you're going to get access to the optimizer. It's got late swap capabilities. It could come in handy if Desmond Bane happened to get ruled out or something like that, even on these 2-game slates. Player and ownership projections, all the tools, including Alex's game environment tool, access to the premium Discord, Fast Eddie Fear, and Mine's ranks, all that stuff coming with the NBA package. And again, hit that platinum package for $100, get access to everything. Again, promo code is FTNTV. It's all one word. Alex, you got a couple minutes to play some ownership game here?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, I will pull up ownership for I think it was the $20 on DraftKings today. It was $500K in the prize pool, $100K to first. We love to see that. End of the season, we were seeing those like $300K prize pools with 100 to first. I'm a much bigger fan of these type of prize pools in structures, especially up top. So Celtics, Bucks. Who is the highest owned player in this first game?
Derrick White.
Easy one. Derrick White, number one. He's 68%. Your second guess, sir.
I think it's probably Giannis.
Giannis, number two. Giannis at 49%. Something we were talking about before we went live in the Discord was I think that newfound Celtics value that opened up was going to push a lot more people towards Giannis. Looked like that came true. Try to finish out the podium here. Derrick White, Giannis, who is third?
Man. Third is really tough. I feel like there are so many guys it could be, and I feel like it could be vastly different in like higher stakes single entry than in mass MME. So for mass MME, I'll say Tatum.
Tatum, number 6.
Wow.
Tatum really fell down there. Yeah. I'll give you another swing.
So I'm wondering if that means that people would have gone to Jalen Brown. I think they'll probably chase Al Horford.
Horford, number 5. You were on the right track with Jalen there. Jalen is number 3. You'll notice there's no number 4 in there. Number 4, the Time Lord. So 5 of those top 6 are Celtics. Jalen, 45. Time Lord, 39. Horford, 37. Tatum, 35. And then another Celtic, Peyton Pritchard at 31%. You got your boy Bobby Portis, 26. Drew Holiday, 24.5. It's not bad. A little higher than last game, but not bad at all.
And last game he was significantly less in single entry, so hopefully he's less again because I went the Drew and Portis route, so I would love that.
Yeah, absolutely. Brooke Lopez, 19. Grant Williams, 18.5. Grayson Allen, 18. Wes Matthews, 11. Pat Connaughton, 9. That's not bad. Javon Carter, 2.5.
Connaughton's the one there that I would be happy with. I think like the other 4 that you mentioned there, they seem pretty significantly over-owned to me. I think they should all be single digits.
I agree with you. We do appreciate the 0.21% of people that held on and played Marcus Smart tonight. We always appreciate people, lowering that rake for the rest of us. Anything else, Alex, as we go, we say goodnight and go watch these games tonight? I'm really excited to see how this plays out. 2 must wins for the home teams here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think I would almost say there's more pressure on Memphis because you can't go to Golden State down 2-0. You're dead if you do. Whereas I feel like the Boston would have a better chance of stealing one or both in Milwaukee.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there. And Josh, giving you some single entry ownership knowledge here. In the $40 single entry, Drew 18%. So I think your theory probably going to come true in the rest of those single entry contests. We appreciate everybody sticking with us through this hour and change. 2 games tonight. We'll be back, Eddie and myself, live with Fast Eddie Fear tomorrow, 6:30 Eastern. It's another half-hour delay from the typical slate start time. And I will advertise this too for anybody who may not be a member yet at FTN. If you're a fan of Eddie Fear and you're a fan of karaoke, you may be a fan of Fast Eddie Fear karaoke. Eddie was in the Discord this morning throwing some karaoke videos out there, taking requests. The going rate was $20 to the charity of your choice. You show that receipt, you put in the request, you get an Eddie karaoke video. So I don't know, how many of those he's going to do. I don't know if he appreciates me putting that out there into the world, but I thought it was something, that's just kind of a bonus thing you get being in our community here. So I wanted to shout that out. I see him talking to Easy B. Easy B made a donation this morning. I forget. I think maybe he was asking for the thong song. Whatever it was, I know it's going to be entertaining. So just another pitch to come join us here at FTN Daily. Again, we appreciate everybody tuning in. For Alex, I'm Zach. Good luck tonight, everybody. And as always,
let's get these beans.